I'm here to listen. Why am I walking on this way?
Hello and welcome to Muse's AT Podcast, where you can relive my epic journey with me. This is Muse, and what follows is my Appalachian Trail story. Today's episode covers the day of June 4th, 2025. And I am right now sitting here by the river in Damascus. I don't remember the name of the river, but I guess that's not abundantly important. Anyway, I do hope that you can hear that behind me, because it is absolutely just as beautiful as it sounds. This came up in prayer this morning. So I was in my tent doing my morning routine, which actually solidified while I was on trail. I'll go into that just a moment here in the intro, and then of course we'll get into the entry as we do. So what I do is, it starts in my Catholic tradition. So it starts centered around a rosary. And I actually do a couple of things to prepare to pray a good rosary. And then it actually mixes in some Eastern tradition as well. And I really like that, like a little bit of Zen Buddhism. Actually, I kind of tack on the back end of the rosary. And together, there's just a lot of, I feel like an opening of a lot of wisdom there. Well, one of the things that came up this morning, and there were things rattling around in my brain for this episode anyway, but it was just like, do it here, and just go do it now, right? So I got ready. Actually, as I was listening to the Zen reflection, I was like, actually one of the recent lessons on that was that Zen is in action, right? The Zen of archery, the Zen of motorcycle maintenance, the Zen of whatever. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to take this in action and continue to listen to this. So I go ahead and get ready while that's going on, because I was just told to go, right? So I went, and I'm here now. So that's really awesome. In this episode, you're actually going to know a lot already about what happened on the 4th, because it was necessary to tell you a lot of the events on the 4th on the 3rd. So we're actually going to take it a little bit in a different direction, and one that's going to possibly answer some open questions for you, because I was kind of planning on, like I said, some stuff was already rattling around. I was planning on doing that anyway. Before we go there, again, as we do, let's take a peek at today's haiku. And today's haiku comes to us from one that I wrote a little over a year before I left for the trail. So this would have been March 24th, 2024. On the verge of greatness. Look to the journey to come for mental toughness. And I will be honest, I have no idea what that was referring to in March of 24, but I actually really like it for June of 25. And with that, on to that entry. Okay, so I'm actually going to read the entry from the home studio. I did record it there by the river, and maybe you'll laugh at me a little bit, I didn't have my reading glasses on me, and I had a really hard time reading the entry on my phone right there next to the river, and so it was absolutely an awful recording. So anyway, here comes the entry without the river behind me, in case you were worried that it dried up or something. No, I am home, and here goes the entry. June 4th, 2025. Onward to Katahdin. Pre-trail. First, an apology. My June 3rd entry was a downer, and for good reason. As I write, I actually still don't know how Esther, the 28-year-old woman, fared. I sincerely hope she is well. That's where my head and heart were on the morning of June 4th. And since this entry probably won't upload until June 7th, for any of you reading in near real time, that's where things stayed for a while. Likely some of you worried. I'm sorry. The day quickly took a turn for the better. It's probably a good time to talk about how awesome the Appalachian Trail Hostel in Millinocket, Maine is. These guys left me so prepared and so pumped up for the journey ahead. Trash Panda and Loins of Arabia, who run the hostel and outfitter, run a tight operation, but more importantly, they genuinely care about the hikers that come through and set them up for success. And everyone on staff is awesome as well. Anyone thinking about going SOBO, that is, southbound on the AT, seriously, start your trek there. After the doubts expressed on Wednesday morning on this channel, I simply had some awesome conversations. By the time I talked to some folks here, I was reassured that we had done everything we could to prepare for Katahdin, and we were ready to go up. They were cheering us on. I talked to Haley, told her how I was feeling, and asked where she was. We made the decision that we would ascend whenever we could. The trails on Wednesday were closed due to the search and rescue, so we left the hostel at 3 p.m. instead of 6 a.m. as originally planned. For the aforementioned reasons, I'm quite grateful for this. Haley and I got into camp, set up, ate dinner, and talked to the ranger. There was a follow-up once we had news, but before going to sleep that night, we knew the trails were open tomorrow. We were going up. Muse here. Just a quick note to ask you for a favor. If you are enjoying what you're hearing, please tell a friend. I'd love to get this story out to as many people as possible. Hopefully it finds just the right set of ears and inspires someone to get out and hit the trail. Of course, if you do see something that could be improved, please let me know. Thank you for walking with me, and happy trails. Hey everyone. This is the part of the episode between the entry and the commentary, where as the podcast develops, I'll drop in an ad or two to get the bills paid. Nothing too intrusive, hopefully, and maybe if we're lucky, we'll pick up some trail-related sponsors. At this point, though, I thought I'd write an ad of my own and read it out. What I'm selling today is simply a plea to get in touch with me. I'll say it in the body of some of the episodes, but probably sometimes I won't. But I really do want to connect. Not only would I love feedback, truly, and am itching to field a question or two, but I also would love to hear your trail stories. This podcast is my way, post-trail, of connecting back with the AT community. Whether you're reliving past glory like I am on this show, prepping for an upcoming hike, or maybe you're on the trail here in 2026, or maybe you're just someone who likes hiking content or in particular the Appalachian Trail, whatever brings you here, I'd love to get to know you. So reach out on Instagram by following Muse Hikes, or email me at museatpodcast@gmail.com. Or another cool way to get in touch, and I'll start getting back to checking this regularly, is to drop a note in my trail journal if you click through to that. The trail journal has pictures with each journal entry, and sometimes I'll refer directly to the picture in the entry as I read it out, so you might want to see that. And I'll also share some photos on that Instagram account as well. There are links to the Instagram profile, the email, and the trail journal in the show notes to each episode. Whichever way you decide to reach out, I'm looking forward to hearing from you. And now, back to the show. All right, so we're doing it. We are going and doing Katahdin, and we will actually start on June 5th now, as we know. Real quick summary of the day, although you just heard it in the entry. From where we left it last episode, some doubts resolved, the decision to go ahead and go. At 3 p.m., we do take the shuttle into Baxter State Park. Loins of Arabia is driving the shuttle again. It is, as we actually also discussed last episode, it is Haley and I, it is Dan and Michaela, and Kevin in that shuttle. So we all get in there, and energy is just high. We are pumped up. We're actually hanging out a little bit with each other. I remember walking around with Dan and Michaela a little bit. I remember chatting at the Bear Lines with Kevin. And we're all just kind of pumped and ready to go tomorrow. Although we didn't know that for absolute sure until later on. It wasn't until, actually, I remember the ranger tapping on my tent and getting my attention, as he promised he would, to tell me that the trails were open in the next morning, and that was probably at 8 o'clock, something like that. So even as we were hanging out in anticipation earlier in the day, we didn't actually know if we were going up tomorrow or the next day or whenever, right? We just knew we were going to do it. But as I just mentioned, we went to sleep that night knowing that we would be able to, and pumped up for that. Okay, I mentioned in the intro I was going to kind of take this in a little bit of a different direction, because you caught that I'm sitting by the river in Damascus, so I'm still here at Trail Days, reconnecting with a lot of my friends. You guys would have just gotten the Trail Days episode on Wednesday of this week, as this comes out on Friday. And, first off, I guess I kind of take you through a little bit of an emotional roller coaster this week. And, if I did, that's actually good, because that's what it was. And so I guess sorry, not sorry, but that was our week back then in June, and that was actually kind of my week these last couple weeks too, because I will say that recording that episode that you heard on Monday kind of tore me up a little bit. It always kind of does. I'd recorded it once before as I was doing the beta listen with the Slowbos, and it did that first time as well. So I came off of that, came here to Trail Days, and really pumped up right now, and actually just really happy to be sitting here by a river talking to you guys. So that different direction that I want to take it, I want to talk about the end of the actual journey, right? Because one of the things that came up in last Friday's episode with Ratatouille, he mentioned that I fell on Springer and almost died. So some of you might be remembering that, and like, we need to get that story, right? Like, what are we talking about? Muse almost died on Springer. As you'll hear when we get there, and we're getting there this episode, as you'll hear when we get there, it wasn't really that dramatic, but it was fairly dramatic, but it wasn't that dramatic. Nobody ever thought that I was actually going to die. So that was said at least a little bit in jest, and just to be really careful because of the events that I've really just related, even earlier in this episode, and certainly on Monday's episode. I really don't want to be being callous, joking about me almost dying when, in fact, we're actually very much in the present talking about some people who actually did die. I still want to keep my respect to them. But anyway, that was said. It was said completely separately from that. That was, at my kitchen table in February, as you know. And so I still do want to explain the comment. To take you there, I'm actually going to start about 4 weeks before that, almost 5 weeks before that instance, right? So this episode might even go a little bit long, but I think this whole story, like I said, I was always going to fill that in, but I think I got to fill in a few other things. For one thing, I made a comment in that very same episode when talking to Ratatouille that I met those guys for Thanksgiving, and my hike was 180 degrees different than it had been before that, right? That begs some questions, like what was it before that? What was going on? So I am going to ground this story by telling you the story of the night that I actually quit the Appalachian Trail. This was a Thursday. I don't remember exactly what Thursday. Probably would have been roughly November 10th-ish, something like that. And I had just had a hard day. And they say never quit on a bad day. I totally quit on a bad day. Obviously, I unquit later. But I had just had a bad day. And I'd actually had kind of a rough week. And I'm going to tell you, and maybe this comes out as a little bit of advice to some of you who might be considering a through hike. One of the things that you want to do, I do think you want to plan. I'm very much a planner myself. I may have already mentioned, but if not, we would get to it soon enough anyway. But you need to hold your deadlines loosely, because although I had a hard week, I look back on that week, and a lot of that week, I don't know, hardness, once you've already overcome it, is actually just awesomeness, right? So that's not really weighing negatively on me, the exact fact that I had a hard week, if that makes any sense. But this hard week also revealed to me I had already moved my quote-unquote deadline, right? I set out saying I'm going to be done by Thanksgiving. That's what I want to do. I want to be done. I want to be home by Thanksgiving. I'd already had to modify that. And I modified that earlier. And that's actually, you guys might have been wondering how I got separated from Crooked Letter. That was when I modified that. I had gone through something you're going to hear about later on, not a mental or emotional, but actually a bit of a physical breakdown in sort of the middle of Virginia. Nothing that rest didn't take care of, but that rest already caused me to modify my deadline. So my deadline at this point in time in my mind is December 6th. And I even remember as early, so we're going to be just outside Irwin when we ground ourselves in this Thursday that I'm talking about. But the weekend before, I was in a place called Hampton, Tennessee. Irwin, by the way, is in Tennessee. So the whole story kind of starts in Tennessee here. I was in a place called Hampton, Tennessee, and I'm texting back and forth with Foggy Froggy and Silly Putty, and they're even like, "Hey, Muse, just take a zero, let us catch up." And this is not an uncommon thing to say. We're friends, we want to kind of catch up with each other. And I was even a little torn in that conversation. I was like, no, can't do that. I kind of got to keep moving on, right? So I'm even telling friends, no, I'm not going to wait for you. Whatever. It was what it was, right? I had this sort of deadline in my mind. Ultimately, though, waiting for them is exactly what I end up doing, and it is what I'm going to even tell you right now really saved my hike. So what actually happened on that Thursday, again, call it November 10th, that may or may not be actually accurate. I was going over Roan Mountain. By the way, this was totally awesome. It had snowed earlier that week. So I was in Hampton. I was actually taking a 0 in Hampton. Not that I really needed or wanted a 0 that day, but I was there because of a blizzard, right? Which ended up not being quite a blizzard, but that's what was forecasted. Either way, there was some snow. I leave Hampton that Tuesday, go about 8 miles because I'm trudging through this snow as I go up in elevation. It's getting deeper and deeper. So I have an unintended short day. I'm continuing to do that through the week, and it's funny as that week goes on that, just going in and out of periods of snow. I'm on Roan Mountain, and now the snow is like 2 feet deep. I'm trudging through that, and again, experientially, this is actually really cool. Like I'm kind of, we'll call it dodging ice, right? Maybe being careful about my footsteps, and again, trudging through this snow. But it had a very negative impact on my trekking pole. My trekking poles, which I had, leaned on. I had mentioned this before, I'd leaned my whole body weight on that before, just kind of keeping me on balance, keeping me from falling down a mountain. And they held up really well for that. Going laterally, being pushed through snow, however, was not the move. So my trekking pole that was just fine at the beginning of the day, it ends up breaking, which is doubly a problem because I had sent my tent poles home way back in Munson, Maine, right? So 6 months before at this point, or 5 months before at this point, I'd sent my tent poles home because a trekking pole tent, right? So now I'm going to have a problem setting up my tent too. To kind of top this off, I couldn't find a place to camp. So I am going through, I'm now down off of Roan Mountain and going along. Darkness continues to descend. I'm getting colder and colder. I'm like, this is getting to be a problem. I really need to set up camp and get in my sleeping bag. But I couldn't find a place anywhere that would even be remotely suitable until I finally did. And I finally did too late, when I got into my tent, because also setting up camp was more difficult now. I had to splint my trekking pole so that I could set up my tent. I am shivering. I'm starting to do the shakes, right? So early stage, maybe even mid stage, hypothermia. So it's getting urgent. I get in, I ultimately get all that resolved, get into my sleeping bag, and it takes me a long time. I want to say 2 hours. Of course, it might have just felt like that. I don't know. But it takes me a long time to warm up. I was actually in a little bit of danger here. But I do warm up. That's fine. I'm sleeping there that night. And funny looking back on it, the other trekking pole, the good trekking pole, falls down on me all night. There's a lot of wind coming through. And the one that I splinted together does perfectly fine, but the good trekking pole is actually facing this wind, and it kept pulling up the tent stake that holds it down on that side, so it just keeps falling on me all night. And I made some decisions that night. I said, I can actually be done. I'm not going to make December 6th. I don't want to disappoint my family and tell them it's going to be later again. I actually got everything I was looking for here on the Appalachian Trail. I have done this journey. I've gone 1,800 miles. If I had to prove that I could do hard things, I've already done that. If I had to find all of, the community, the connectedness, my own sort of spiritual centeredness and everything, I had kind of checked those boxes too, right? So, you know what? Good enough. My family's going to come. I forgot to tell you this part of the tale, but I guess we're just kind of coming to it anyway. So I'm barely outside of Irwin. I am due in Irwin on Saturday morning at this point. And I had been talking for a while with Evan, who I had mentioned Haley graduated the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. Evan goes to the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. So I'm now as close to Knoxville as I'm going to get on this journey. So I've been talking to him for a little while. Hey, I'm going to be in Irwin this weekend, or I can make it to where I'll make sure I'm in Irwin this weekend. And I've been doing the things to make sure of that up until this point. And really the effect of this sort of harder week, I feel like I was still going to make it to Irwin, which I don't know. When we get there in the narrative, maybe this will be clearer, because I don't know why then I would have to modify the end date if I was still going to make the Saturday date. Yeah, part of that's not adding up. But again, we'll fill that in later. I was due in Irwin that Saturday. Somebody was going to pick me up because I'm talking to Evan and he and Dylan. I was going to visit with them. But then Haley and Carrie ended up saying, well, we're free that weekend. We'll come over as well. So it's actually going to be like a big, almost like family reunion on the trail, which it was, and that was awesome. So that's what's going on. And I'm like, I'm just going to go home with them. I'm done. And I woke up that next morning, obviously a Friday. That's how that works. It was a Thursday. I woke up, it was Friday. And I was still done. I was just good with it, right? I wasn't really even sad. I was good with it. I had full on quit. Now, even though this is the important part of this story, this is an important part of this story. Again, I need to answer those questions that have been looming. But an important part of this story is that even though everything I just said was true, even though I checked all of the boxes, had I quit, what I would have left on the table would have been astounding. When people here at Trail Days are asking me how my trek ended, how it was at the end, I light up. I'm like, it was awesome. I got together with my friends and we hiked the whole rest of the way together, and it was great. So you're about to hear all of that too. And again, I told you I'd go a little long today, but you're about to hear all of that too. But that's sort of the vibe that I want to put out there today, is that yes, I checked all the boxes. I gotten everything I wanted out of the Appalachian Trail. But had I quit on that day, I would have gotten a lot less than I ended up getting. And that is hugely important to me. I'm done, right? So I'm not going to hike till lunchtime on Saturday when I was going to meet them. Oh, that's how I was going to miss it, because I was going to meet them north of Irwin. So it was going to be at least a couple days, and I suspected it wasn't my last slowdown because of snow, right? So that's where the problem was. The timing problem was going to be, because I would still have had a day to hike into Irwin, so I was at least a day behind, and again, I was going to lose more. So anyway, I'm no longer going to be a day behind. I'm going to go ahead and go into Irwin tonight. I mean, why wouldn't I? Right? So I call a shuttle, but she's babysitting. And she's not going to be able to pick me up until like 4 in the afternoon. So I'm like, well, I'm not going to hike to that point that I would have met you at noon. Met her at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So I ended up hiking 16 miles the day after I quit, and loved it, right? All kind of pressures I was putting on myself were off at this point. It was like a beautiful sunny day. There was still some snow on the ground, so of course there was. I wouldn't just disappear. But like, that was cool too. I was always kind of happy with the snow anyway. As much as that becomes a catalyst, it was always something I was excited about. I'm somebody who's always loved snow. So just had the most amazing day hiking. But I had already resolved myself. I was quitting, right? So I'm in the hotel that night. So I went ahead and checked in a night early to the hotel that I was going to, that I had booked on Saturday. Yeah, just Saturday for the family visit. So I end up there Friday and Saturday, and I'm just in the hotel testing my family, and I let it slip that my trekking pole broke, because I wasn't planning on telling them. And they're like, oh, do we need to bring you anything? Do we need to bring you a pair of trekking poles? And I'm kind of like, no, don't really need those. I'll just go ahead and tell you guys now. You know, this is what's going on. They immediately called me up, and here's what Carrie told to me. She was like, you don't have to make this decision now. And by the way, I know how you are. You are somebody who's putting this pressure on yourself. I hadn't even told her that part, right? But she knows me. She's my wife. That makes sense. You're putting this pressure on yourself because you told me December 6th now. Do whatever you got to do. Just make this what you've got to make it and just finish whenever. So that's okay, great. I kind of had a permission that I wasn't feeling before, for one. But yeah, but this is like, see how this, we're coming to visit you anyway. See how the weekend goes. Then take an extra day for yourself. I'm telling you to take a 0. So, all of that. So we have the family visit. I take that extra day. Now I'm at Uncle Johnny's hostel. So I start at, I don't remember what hotel chain it was, but I start at this hotel because I was visiting with my family. But I go to Uncle Johnny's that's where I end up. No. I'd quit north, right? So I actually had to, Carrie and Haley dropped me off on Sunday back in the woods. I hiked back to Uncle Johnny's, got there Monday night or something like that. So I did I don't know, 15 miles or something like that between Sunday and Monday. Yeah, got into Uncle Johnny's on Monday night. And I was already meeting people that I had already known, right? I'd actually been hanging out with, my rest day and everything was with Mama Turtle, who we'll meet later on, and Poncho Man, who we'll meet actually even a little bit later on. So I'm already kind of having fun with trail friends. It's not the Slowbos. And I just decided at this point, because by the time I visited with my family, I took my rest day for myself. Now, Silly Putty and Froggy Froggy are only a day behind me. All right, I've got a new mission now anyway, but I'm also, regardless, I was never going to not wait for a day, right? So I wait for them for a day, one single day. I wait one more day in Irwin, meet up with Silly Putty, Froggy Froggy. I probably need to speed this up a little bit, so I will kind of summarize from here, but basically, so I meet up with Silly Putty, Froggy Froggy again, meet Timber for the first time there at Uncle Johnny's in Irwin, Tennessee. And then we go for the next week for kind of one of the awesomest weeks on trail, to be perfectly honest. So it's the 4 of us. We're hanging. Well, I mean, again, like I already said, all 4 of these next weeks are like the awesomest weeks on trail. But this one's special too in its own way because it's the 4 of us. We're getting in tight. I'd already known Silly Putty, Froggy Froggy. They were already friends of mine at this point. But, we're growing closer as well. I'm getting to meet and know Timber. We're getting closer. And we're also going super slow. Because by the time we left Uncle Johnny's, we had gotten in touch with Ratatouille, Utah, and Marco Polo. And they were going to push. And I'm still astounded that they did what they did. Because they had to cover like 150 miles in 7 days. Which, if you tell me that average over one day, I'd be like, oh, okay. We all did that on occasion, right? But sustaining it over 7 days, that's significant. And so they had to seriously push to catch us. But what we had to do was slow to like a crawl, which kind of made this, we took away even the athletic endeavor of it, right? Like now we're just chilling, right? We're doing short days. We actually took a 0 in there because we went to Froggy Froggy's cousin's house and met Scott and Cheryl, and that was just an awesome thing. I can't wait to get there. It's going to be a while now, but can't wait to get there in the story because that was an awesome weekend. And we're just the 4 of us. We're just becoming a really tight-knit group. And then this is where Miss Janet comes in. Miss Janet picks us up in Hot Springs, picks our friends up trail a little bit, and then we all end up in Greenville, Tennessee for Thanksgiving. That was absolutely wonderful. I mean, we're all getting together again too. Like, yeah, the 4 of us had all spent a week together, and we had a great week. But then we're seeing the other 3. That's exciting. Hadn't seen Ratatouille since, on Trail, Massachusetts, Ratatouille in Utah and New York City. Hadn't seen Marco Polo since Munson in Maine. So like this is just really cool. And then what we do from there is we just take it from that awesome Thanksgiving visit. So we end up in Greenville for a couple of days, right? We get there on the Wednesday. We do Thanksgiving. we do Black Friday, essentially. We do the Friday after Thanksgiving, and then we leave there on a Saturday. And then the four of us, Silly Putty, Foggy Froggy, and Timber and I, hang out in Hot Springs for a day, as they needed to fill in those last miles to Hot Springs. And so that was cool. So now we're all together on trail. We go south, and it's just, I mean, it's awesome. It's 7 of us, and all the dynamics of a group of 7, and all of the dynamics of the group of 7 going through the Smoky Mountain National Park, which was awesome in its own right. I'm saying the word awesome a lot. Sorry about that. I think I've said that like 1,000 times today, but that's just what it was. And then we end up on Springer. And then Springer is its own bit of awesomeness. And we've adopted Huck into the group by now. So we're now 8 of us going into Springer. And that happened like at Mountains Crossing, right? We had met him the week before, and then he joined us in that hostel, that last hostel on the trail. And it was awesome. He's like, yeah, I'm one of you guys now. And we're like, yeah, totally. You're a cool guy. So there's 8 of us now. And we're going up Springer, and we've all got family. Well, not all of us, but many of us have family there. So really, there's a group of 20 people going up Springer, especially the last mile. Some had joined over the course of the day. The other thing about this last day is that I mentioned before, and I know Ratatouille and I mentioned together, when you're on trail together, you're not necessarily together the whole time, right? You're going to be... you see each other, you hike for a little bit together, you're chatting while you're hiking, but we're all out there wanting to enjoy nature and stuff a little bit too, so then you do separate a little bit, and then you get back together, and it's kind of its own fun dynamic, and that's been what's going on for 4 weeks at this point. But this last day, and I think this might have even been my suggestion, so if it was, go me. If it's not, sorry, fellow Slobo, for taking credit for it. But we said we're going to hike it together. And they actually put me at the head of the line. Why exactly, I don't know. I was kind of in the middle of this group of speed, so I wasn't the slowest. Certainly wasn't the fastest either. A couple of these folks out-hike me any day, any time. But I guess I was probably the most type A is what it comes down to. So they put me in the front, and I'm just leading the group. And I'm, I kind of get my old scout leader in me, and I'm just kind of making sure that, everybody's back there, and I'm the pace setter for the day. And we're just cutting, and then like, it was like almost a rotation. Who was right behind me? I remember talking to Margot for a good while, and then talking to Huck for a while, talking to Ratatouille for a while, and it was like a rotation. Who was right behind me? Silly Putty was right behind me for a while, and I think everybody at one point was the person keeping Muse company, I suppose. But it was just that same awesome dynamic that we'd had, because you just kind of fell into a bit of a rotation on trail. I'd run into Utah, or I'd run into whoever, and that was cool. So we're going up there, high energy day anyway. We hiked the whole day together. It's only a 12-mile day. We gave ourselves an ease day for the last day. But high energy day, the last mile, all of our families join us. So Haley and Evan are there now too. And so it's a party up there. Silly Putty's parents brought Prosecco. We're up there toasting, and we're taking pictures and everything. So here's where we get to the almost died comment. We're taking a picture on the rock. We're all taking a picture on this rock that has a plaque on it. I fell off the back of the rock. Not a long fall. Like, I was sitting on the rock and lost my balance. And because it was at sitting height, I'm sitting on a rock right now as I speak, and it was about the same height. So you wouldn't think any big deal, but I hit hard, right? And folks were worried about me, but then I just kind of pushed through it for the rest of pictures and everything. I didn't want to be like the reason the celebration was cut short. It did cut one thing short, though. There's like an arch down at Amicalola State Park, and for northbounders, for Nobos, they started this arch, and they do this approach trail up Springer to then start the trail. Well, all of us were going to skip the approach trail anyway. We were going back to that parking lot where we met the families, and we were driving to this arch, right? But we're all going to get pictures of the arch and everything, and that was going to be the real farewell. Well, I said my farewells in the parking lot, because after that fall, I had the wind knocked out of me. And I could kind of breathe a little, but I kind of couldn't. And I didn't know if I'd broken a couple ribs or not. So I'm still, smiling. It might look more like a grimace through, smiling-ish teeth or whatever. But I'm still smiling through pictures and everything. So I didn't cut that short, but then I ultimately, I got to get down off this mountain. Folks were starting to leave anyway. And I took forever, right? Because I'd walk like 100 feet, and then I'd be like, I just got to catch my breath. Honestly, the fact that I was a mile away from the car was probably good, because I sort of walked this off a little bit. But I was still hurting, right? And so got there. I left the parking lot saying, I don't know if I'm going to seek medical attention or not. I don't know if the 5-hour essentially sitting down in the car, 5-hour drive back home, might even just kind of do it. It ended up being that. I didn't even have to seek medical attention. I was a little sore the next couple days, but nothing like when I was up on the mountain. And ultimately, that just went away. So that's filling that in. And it was. I mean, going back on the whole thing, going back on my comment of how that changed the hike, was the hike awesome before I quit? Yes, absolutely. It's not like it changed it from terrible to awesome, but it changed it from awesome to a different awesome, right? And obviously there was, a little bit of strife in there too. So it changed it from that to none, right? The Smokies were not easy. And none of us cared, because we were together. We were loving life, and it was great. So that is where this story's headed. Now, I don't want you to think, I heard the end of the story, so I don't need to keep listening, because there's a lot of cool stuff in between where we are actually on the verge of being on Katahdin the next day and Springer, what you just heard of. So please keep listening and get to that. But that is where we're headed, and what being at Trail Days here this week has me reflecting on, and has me just hugely grateful about. And of course, grateful that my hike didn't end in Irwin, Tennessee, but rather ended on Springer on December 17th. Okay, so next episode, Katahdin. Until then, this has been Muse, coming to you from a beautiful spot sitting on a rock by the river. Thank you for listening. Thank you for walking with me, and happy trails.